James had been married to Sarah for 15 years. But over time, everything had become routine. They were living in the same house, yet it felt like they were in separate worlds. The connection that once existed between them had faded, and they had grown apart. They no longer shared intimate conversations or even the same bed. Sarah, once so vibrant, had become distant, and James couldn't help but feel the emptiness that had settled between them. It wasn't until Sarah started dropping subtle hints that James began to notice. He had been so wrapped up in his own world that he hadn't seen the signs before. He did some digging, and what he uncovered was painful. She had been emotionally involved with someone else. It wasn't that Sarah had stopped complaining, but James had long stopped listening. Every time she brought up her unhappiness, he dismissed it, thinking it was just another complaint. But the truth was undeniable. When James finally acknowledged the truth, he stopped ignoring her. He realized that Sarah was no longer in love with him. It stung, but he knew deep down that he couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. He had been holding on to the idea of their marriage, but the reality was far from what it used to be. Instead of arguing with her, he decided to let go. He couldn't force her to feel something she no longer did. One night, as he sat alone in the living room, James had a moment of clarity. He had been replaying their last argument in his mind, trying to figure out how to fix things. But then it hit him. Why was he trying to convince her that she was wrong about how she felt? Her feelings were valid, and he had been dismissing them for too long. In that moment, James realized that he wasn't happy either. He wasn't in love with Sarah anymore. He was in love with the idea of their marriage, the life they once shared. This realization was a wake-up call. James knew that things had to change. He had been living in the past, hoping for things to go back to how they were. But that was never going to happen. So he made a decision. He was going to stop pretending. He tossed the empty beer bottles into the trash and prepared to spend the night in the guest room. It was part of his plan to give space, but just as he was about to settle in, Sarah walked in, flicked on the light, and interrupted his thoughts. "Why are you sleeping in the guest room?" Sarah asked, her voice filled with confusion. James squinted against the harsh light. He had planned this conversation for a while, but now that the moment was here, he wasn't sure how to respond. "I stayed up late and didn't want to disturb you," he replied casually. Sarah studied him for a moment before heading to the kitchen to make herself coffee. She had always been the one to start the mornings with caffeine. James never needed it. James had always been a light sleeper, but tonight, he felt oddly calm. After the tension from their past arguments, it felt like a weight had lifted. When he walked into the living room, Sarah was sitting on the couch, visibly agitated. Her fists were clenched. "James," she started, her voice trembling. "This isn't working. I feel lost, disappointed, and I don't think I love you anymore." James sat still, letting her words sink in. He knew what was coming, but hearing it out loud still stung. "I know we've been together a long time," Sarah continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I think we need to get a divorce." The word divorce hung in the air like a heavy weight. James didn't react immediately. He simply nodded. "That sounds good, Sarah," he said, his voice calm. Sarah stared at him in disbelief. "James, did you hear me?" she asked, her eyes wide with confusion. "Yes, I heard you," James replied. "You feel it's not working, you don't love me, and you want a divorce." "I agree." Sarah's face twisted in confusion. She searched his face for a reaction, but James stood firm. He couldn't deny her feelings. She had made her decision, and he wasn't about to fight it. "Do you understand now?" she asked, her voice shaking. James stood up and walked over to her. He knelt down in front of her, looking up into her eyes. "Sarah, I can't change how you feel. If you don't love me, I can't argue with that. Your feelings are yours, and I respect that." Sarah looked at him as though he had lost his mind, but deep down, she saw that he understood. "Wait," Sarah said, her voice shaking as she stepped back, eyes wide. "You said you didn't love me." James nodded, his expression calm. "There were times just like you." "I understand how you feel," he replied. Sarah's face twisted with confusion, as if this wasn't a reaction she expected. But in that moment, James could see the shift in her. She realized he wasn't fighting her anymore. The recognition was clear in her eyes, and it gave her pause. "Anything else?" James asked, his voice gentle. Sarah stood there, lost in her thoughts for a moment. "I need to leave tonight. I need space," she said, her voice quieter now. "Are you leaving right now?" James asked. Sarah's voice barely rose above a whisper. "I am," she said, as she grabbed her things. James watched her, his emotions mixed. He had never imagined things would end like this. "I think I'll hit a few bars. Maybe start looking for someone else," he said without hesitation, but the words felt heavier than he intended. James left the house, walking into the night as if it were just another evening. He made his way to the nearest bar, ordered a drink, and sat away from the crowd, feeling oddly disconnected. Pulling out his phone, he dialed Lily, a coworker he had flirted with a few times. He painted himself as the abandoned husband, telling her about the conversation he'd had with Sarah. Lily didn't hesitate. She invited herself to meet him, saying she wanted to keep him company. James didn't think twice. Why not, he thought. His marriage was over. He wasn't concerned if anyone saw him. They were already done. He met Lily at a bar they both knew well. He watched as she entered, dressed to impress, clearly ready to be a distraction from his pain. Lily was quick to notice James' mood, but something about him didn't match the gravity of the situation. "James, what's happening?" Lily asked, sitting beside him, confusion etched on her face. He smiled, almost playfully. "Sarah wants a divorce. I don't see the point in fighting it," he said nonchalantly, tapping his fingers on the table. "I don't love her like I used to. And if she wants out, fine. I'm not going to spend my life waiting for something that isn't coming." Lily sipped her drink, watching him carefully. "Maybe we should dance," James added, eager to change the subject. Lily raised an eyebrow. "Dance?" she asked. James grinned and pulled her up from the table. "Yeah, why not? I'm going to do whatever I want right now, and right now I want to dance with you." They moved to the dance floor, and the music carried them away. Lily pressed herself closer, her body warm against his. "If you're trying to get back at her, it's working," Lily said with a playful smile. James shrugged, enjoying the moment. "Maybe," he said. The night passed in a blur of dancing, laughter, and drinks. It felt good to be desired again, even if it wasn't real. He didn't take Lily home that night. He just enjoyed the feeling of being wanted. As he kissed her goodnight in the parking lot, he felt a small satisfaction in his ego being repaired. He wasn't sure if he was trying to get revenge on Sarah or if he was just enjoying the fleeting moments of attention. The next day, James arrived home late, but Sarah was already in bed. As soon as he walked in, she jumped up. "Where have you been?" she snapped. James undressed without answering. "I went out. I told you I was leaving." "Why should you care?" he replied. Sarah's voice softened, a tremor of worry in it. "I was worried you might do something bad to yourself." James smiled bitterly. "Sarah, I'm fine. You want a divorce? I'll gladly give you one. I'm not going to beg you to stay." He grabbed his pillow and started to head for the guest room, but Sarah stopped him. "James, you don't have to sleep in another bed," she said, her voice hesitant. He paused and shifted the pillow to his other hand. "Are you suggesting that I move out of our bedroom?" he asked, his voice deliberately neutral. Sarah's face flushed, her eyes filled with unshed tears. "No, I didn't mean that," she said quickly. "You can share the bed with me if you want to." James hesitated, then decided it wasn't worth dragging out the tension. "Well, this bed is more comfortable. I'll stay here with you, if it's not too much trouble." Sarah's face brightened, relief flooding her features. "Oh yes, that would be wonderful. I mean, it's no problem for me." James tossed his pillow back onto the bed. He could see Sarah was about to say something, but he didn't want to hear it. "Let's just go to bed," he said, cutting her off as he crawled under the covers. The next few days passed in a strange silence between them. James continued to go out, meeting various women, but it didn't feel the way he had imagined. He thought he'd be liberated, but instead, he found himself thinking about Sarah. It wasn't the same. He realized that he wasn't just moving on, he was avoiding the uncomfortable truth that their marriage had ended. It hit him harder than he expected. But life went on, and he was determined to make the best of it. One day, at work, his coworker Maya mentioned something about a woman seeing James at a bar the night before. "Carol saw you last night at the bar," Maya said, her voice tinged with curiosity. "She said you were with a woman. Who was that?" The question caught him off guard. "What were you doing together?" Maya asked, her eyes searching his face. James stood still for a moment, unsure how to respond. "I went out," he said simply, brushing it off. "I told Sarah I was leaving. Why should it matter?" Maya's expression faltered, but she stayed quiet. James wasn't in the mood for a confrontation, especially not with someone who wasn't fully aware of the situation. When he got home that evening, Sarah was waiting for him. Her eyes were red, like she had been crying. The tension between them was palpable. "I heard about you and that woman from work," she said quietly. "What's going on, James? What are you doing?" James took a deep breath. "I'm doing what I need to do, Sarah," he replied, his voice low but firm. "If you don't want me anymore, why should I keep pretending?" Sarah's face twisted with hurt, and for a brief moment, he felt a pang of guilt. But it quickly passed. He had been living for too long in her shadow, trying to fix something that was already broken. "You want a divorce, right? You said it yourself. So, why shouldn't I move on?" Sarah's eyes watered as she struggled to find the words. "James, you don't understand," she said, her voice shaky. "I don't want this. I didn't want us to end up here." James stood silent, watching her, feeling a mixture of anger and regret. "Then why did you ask for a divorce?" he asked, his voice cold. "Why did you check out long before I did?" Sarah flinched at his words, but he didn't feel sorry for her. This was the reality they had created. A few days later, James had another date with Lily. It was a quick dinner, followed by drinks. It wasn't anything serious, but it was fun. They had their moments of laughter, their playful flirting. But something was missing. James realized that he wasn't looking for someone to replace Sarah. He was just trying to fill the void, and no one was going to do that. Lily could sense the distance in him, but she didn't push it. The following night, Sarah surprised him. As he was about to head out for another night of distraction, Sarah stopped him. "James," she said softly, "I've been thinking a lot." James raised an eyebrow, unsure of where this conversation was going. "I'm sorry," Sarah continued. "I shouldn't have shut you out. I should have listened to you, to how you were feeling. I made mistakes, and I've realized that I don't want to lose you." James looked at her, his expression unreadable. "So, what do you want, Sarah?" he asked, his voice steady. "You want to take back your request for a divorce? You want to try and fix this?" Sarah nodded. "I do. I think I've been running from what we had, and I don't want to lose you." For a moment, James didn't say anything. He was processing her words, trying to figure out if he felt the same way. "I'm not sure if I can go back to how things were," James said finally. "I don't want to live in the past. We've both changed, and I think that's okay." Sarah looked down, nodding in understanding. "I know," she whispered. "I don't want to go back to the way things were either. I just want to be with you, James. I want to try again, but only if we're both willing to change." James sighed. "We'll see, Sarah. We'll see." As the days went by, Sarah and James tried to rebuild what they once had. They began to talk more openly about their feelings, but it wasn't easy. The walls they had built over the years didn't come down overnight. James still spent time with other women, but now it felt different. He wasn't using them to fill the emptiness anymore. He was doing it because he wanted to remind himself that he still had options, even if it was just for his ego. But something about it felt wrong now. He couldn't shake the feeling that, no matter how many other women he met, none of them could replace Sarah. One night, after dinner, Sarah reached out to him. "James, I've been thinking," she said, nervously twisting the napkin in her hands. "I know we've been through a lot, but I want to be honest with you. I don't know if I can ever fully trust you again, not after everything that's happened." James sat across from her, his heart sinking. He had hoped for a fresh start, but he knew that trust, once broken, was difficult to repair. "I get it," he replied quietly. "I've hurt you, and I don't expect everything to be fixed just like that." Sarah took a deep breath, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I know we've been through hell, but I'm still here. I want to make this work, James. I need to know that you're as committed to this as I am." James hesitated. He had been torn between the idea of giving their marriage another chance and the reality that they might never get back to the way things were. "I'm here, Sarah," he said softly, though the words didn't carry the same conviction they once would have. Their days continued in this tentative rhythm, one step forward and two steps back. Every time Sarah reached out to him, James felt the old bitterness well up inside him. Yet, he couldn't help but respond to her. There was something about her that still held him captive, something that called him back, even when he wanted to fight it. It wasn't love, but it was a bond that neither of them could completely sever. Meanwhile, James began spending more time with Ava, a woman he had met a few weeks earlier. Ava was younger, carefree, and didn't carry the baggage of the past that Sarah did. They enjoyed simple things together, laughing over drinks, long walks in the park, and late-night conversations. But as much as he liked Ava's company, James found himself comparing her to Sarah. Ava was fun, but she wasn't the woman who had shared his life for so long. In the end, no matter how many dates he went on, Sarah was always in his mind. One evening, after a particularly intense conversation with Sarah about the future, James found himself at the bar again. He was sitting with Lily talking about the past few weeks and the things Sarah had said. "I can't go back, Lily," James admitted, the weight of his words sinking in. "I want to move forward, but I don't know if Sarah and I can get past everything." Lily looked at him, her expression softening. "You don't have to have all the answers right now," she said. "Just take it one day at a time." Back home that night, James sat in the guest room, thinking about his conversation with Lily. Sarah had given him an ultimatum. Either they move forward together, or they call it quits. But how could he choose? He wasn't sure if his heart was still in it. His mind kept drifting back to his past with Sarah, the love, the pain, the years they had shared. He couldn't just turn that off, no matter how much he wanted to move on. The next morning, Sarah found James in the kitchen, sitting with a coffee cup in hand, looking distant. "James," she began softly, her voice careful. "I don't know where we're headed, but I can't keep pretending I'm okay with how things are." He looked up at her, his eyes tired but determined. "I know," he said quietly, "but I'm not sure if we can fix it, Sarah. We've tried, but it feels like we're just going in circles." Sarah stood there, looking at him with a mixture of sadness and frustration. "So, what does that mean? Are you just going to give up on us?" she asked, her voice trembling. James didn't have an answer. He couldn't promise her something he wasn't sure he could give. "I'm not giving up, Sarah," he said after a long pause. "But I need more than just words. We both need to decide what we want." Later that day, James decided to meet with Maya for a drink. They sat at a quiet table, and Maya could sense something had changed in him. "How's Sarah?" Maya asked, her voice cautious. James exhaled slowly. "She's still in this with me, but I don't know if I can be. I don't want to hurt her, but I don't know if we can go back to what we had. Too much has changed." Maya nodded, understanding the weight of his words. "I think you need to make a decision, James. It's either her or you move on for real." James spent the rest of the night thinking about Maya's words. It was clear that he couldn't keep juggling his past and his future forever. He needed to choose, Sarah or a life without her. But that decision wasn't easy. No matter what happened, he knew one thing for sure. Their marriage had changed forever, and so had he. The next morning, James found himself staring at the phone in his hand, unsure of what to do. Should he call Sarah and end it, or should he give their marriage one last shot? After everything they had been through, he didn't know if there was a way back. But one thing was certain. He couldn't keep living in this limbo. The decision had to be made, one way or another. That evening, James sat down with Sarah once again. This time, there were no more words about divorce or separation. They had both come to a mutual understanding. "James, I've thought about what you said," Sarah began, her voice steady but soft. "I don't know where we're headed, but I want to try. If you're willing to try with me, then I'm here." James nodded slowly. "I'm willing," he said, though he still didn't know what the future held for them. "Let's take it one day at a time." The next few weeks were a blur of small changes. They started spending more time together, talking through their problems and attempting to rebuild trust. But it wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt and frustration, but James had stopped trying to force things. He had accepted that their relationship had changed, and he was no longer trying to go back to what it was. Instead, they were both learning to navigate their new reality. One evening, Sarah turned to James and smiled. For the first time in a long time, I feel like we're getting somewhere, she said. James looked at her, surprised by the warmth in her eyes. Me too, he replied, feeling a flicker of hope for the first time in months. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. They were starting to understand each other again, in a way they hadn't in years. As the weeks turned into months, James realized that while their marriage wasn't the same, it was no longer a source of pain for him. He and Sarah had learned to communicate more openly, and although there were still occasional tensions, they were facing them together. It wasn't the ideal relationship, but it was one they had both agreed to work on. And that, to James, felt like a step forward. In the end, James understood something crucial. People change and relationships evolve. The love they once shared was gone, but they had found something new, a mutual respect, a willingness to try again, and a sense of understanding that hadn't been there before. And as he sat down at the kitchen table one morning, Sarah by his side, James knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together. Maybe that was enough after all. Please like, comment, and do not forget to subscribe.